As of yesterday, a day after turning 2 years old officially, the details of Payday 3's massive Skills 2.0 update are finally out in the open for us to discuss. Is this the panacea that could turn the game's fortunes around after a frankly disjointed year 2? It just might be. At least it should be the first step in turning the perception of this video essay magnet of a game on its head. In this video I'll be showcasing all 6 new skill trees, each containing 3 small distinct playstyle lines, with 6 unique effects and a further 6 extensions of those effects upon acing them out. That's 216 separate skills to discuss, so instead of just listing them off in this slightly confusing order as presented, I'm doing my very best to list them side by side and attempt to emulate their actual in-game presentation. That said, there are a few things you need to know about the system before we get into discussing the individual skills. Firstly, these skill trees don't function in quite as linear a way as we might be used to coming from Payday 2, despite that being their clear inspiration. Across the core 6 trees we have to unlock each tier by equipping skills from the previous one. However, the next tier is unlocked across all 3 subtrees. This means you can build up through Juggernaut to unlock tier 3 before heading over to grab Scavenger and Grenadier without needing prerequisite points in that line as shown in this screenshot. That means some of the freedom to mix and match from Payday 3's old skill line system has been preserved. On the other hand, the base skill of each subtree always has an effect, which scales based on total points in the tree, up to a max of 12, meaning you're still very much encouraged to focus on certain playstyles to maximise their effectiveness, instead of just spreading yourself thin on tier 4 skills. Also, as mentioned previously, just like in Payday 2, each skill has an aced effect, which can only be accessed once you've equipped the basic version, meaning these innately have a higher sunk cost to use, and are generally more valuable as a result. In terms of total skill points we'll have access to, as well as point cost scaling, none of that is finalised or shared here. I think having skills at different values is core to a successful system, as it prevents every build rushing to equip as many tier 4 skills as possible, but exactly at what rate they should scale is still very much up in the air. Hopefully they can refine this with our feedback to nail it on release. I should also note, because it's going to get confusing as anything later if I don't explain now, cop armor and health scaling is also changing alongside these new skills. From this update, you can expect armoured SWATs and specials to wear layers of protective armour that will need to be stripped away to access their health pool, unless your weapon has a good enough penetration stat to cut straight to the chase. This has always been a mechanic in the game, with the difference being that cops are now going to wear multiple layers of this armoured protection, tanking up to compete with damage multipliers that have gone from 10% to upwards of 100%, and allowing for some new skills which interact uniquely with their armour. This in mind, it's almost impossible to say if damage and armor related skills are going to be impactful or not until we've tested them up against these new foes, hence my hesitation at calling certain skills outright overpowered. Just know this shouldn't simply be further power creep making the game easier. The cops are being adjusted to keep up for once. Oh, and the whole edge, grit and rush system has been completely scrapped. There will still be certain buffs you might need to keep on top of, but this skill system undoubtedly features less micromanagement than the old one did. Housekeeping out the way, let's jump into the meat of this one with the Juggernaut tree in Soldier. This one is armor focused, with its starting skill providing scaling damage reduction at 1% per skill point in the tree, maxing out at 12% passively to any active armor plates. The Ace version, rather confusingly, grants 0.05% damage reduction per point, up to a max of 0.6% for every point of trauma damage active on a plate. This effectively makes your plates tankier as they get closer to breaking, which also sounds damn good on both resistant and adaptive armor plates. Heading up to Armored Up 1, this is a very straightforward skill that exists across all equipment focused lines, simply granting you up to 3 more charges of the armor bag when aced out. I won't be dwelling on this or similar cross-skill line options for long, but just know they're probably not all that interesting, but still likely to become staples. A more interesting skill is Head Guard, reducing your armor regen time by 0.2 seconds for each headshot you land, up to 0.6 seconds when aced. With Plate Up leaving the game in Skills 2.0, this is its bullseye-like replacement, giving you a reliable way to speed up armor recovery by being accurate and aggressive. It's decent, with one blue plate taking 1 second to recharge normally, although I'm uncertain whether the reduced regen will be reset if you take damage before it has the chance to activate, weakening its application in many builds. Armored Up 2 provides 2 more bag charges as well as an entire extra bag to deploy when aced, another powerful but standard skill across these sorts of lines. Beast of Burden is just two of Transporter's most important skills combined, allowing you to carry 2 bags and then move without a 2-bag penalty for holding them both when aced. Unfortunately staple across most builds and heists, meaning most players will find themselves dumping skills into Soldier out of necessity, as they once did in Transporter. I really do think the ability to carry 2 bags with a speed penalty should just be standard to all heisters' kits. Finally, Bastion is the tier 4 skill for Juggernauts and is fairly busted. Even when only basiced out, it will provide a renewable disengage effect for breaking out of Cloaker and Zapper stuns, which replenishes every 30 seconds, totally countering Payday 3's most irritating enemy type in an instant. Acing it out provides utility against dozers, allowing you to knock them out of their charge and sprint through Nader's gas. Both are much more situational than its exceptional basic effect. Commando is up next, an assault rifle and light machine gun focused tree. Its base skill provides you with 0.1 armor penetration for each skill placed within it, an effect that we can't really call one way or another until we've experienced the new COP armor system, but does tie heavily into how this tree is designed to function. Its aced effect grants you faster AR and LMG reload speeds up to 30% with 12 points in the tree, or 60% if loading an empty mag, punishing my over-reloading habits. Stockpile is another standard skill, this time shared across all weapon-specific trees, which offers 30% more reserve ammo for LMGs and ARs, increasing to 80% when aced. Focus Fire is an accuracy-enhancing skill, granting you 2% improved accuracy with LMGs and ARs for each shot landed without missing, in which case it resets to 0% unless you have it aced out, instead reducing the boon by 2% for any stray shots. This feels fairly low impact and will probably turn into more of a 10%, 20% floating accuracy buff for these weapon classes, outside of specific instances against the likes of dozers. Hollow point rounds is much more enticing, increasing your AR and LMG health damage specifically by up to 40% once aced, which again plays into this penetration style that aims to avoid having to break down armor directly. Breaking Point assists with that, increasing your pen by 0.15 when aced for every shot that doesn't penetrate SWAT armor until one eventually does, giving you a surefire way through to hit that soft underbelly and make use of the bonus health damage. Ammo Funnel, the tier 4 skill, does pretty much what its infamous predecessor did before it, giving you ammo back on kill like Replenish when basicked, and filling the mag directly when aced. However, this is heavily balanced from the old version. Now it only works with LMGs and ARs, and the kills they get to proc the effect need to be on cops with armor, meaning only penetrative kills count. This means it will have counter synergy when playing in a team online, and will be much weaker as a result. Still, I can see this armor penetrating style being highly effective against the new multiplate system. Grenadier rounds out Soldier with its first skill Bombs Away, granting 10% additional frag grenade damage, scaling to 120% with all points in the tree, as well as extending their blast radius by up to 6 meters when aced out. Stockpile does similar for throwable trees as it does weapons, increasing your starting loadout frag capacity by 4 when aced out fully. Burn damage when aced makes it so that cops hit by your grenades take up to 45% bonus damage from then on, sort of marking them from death, which should give you some indication of how tanky cops might be after this update, bearing in mind they will need to survive a grenade in the first place and still need to take bonus damage from all sources to be dealt with. Sudden Impact enables your grenades to explode on impact, and will assumedly still work on the Markham Mamba overkill weapon, whilst acing it out makes it so direct hits with frags deal 60% additional damage to all in the radius. Scavenger is a returning skill, giving you a 5% chance when aced to resupply your throwables from ammo drops, half the chance of the original but without the need to keep edge active for a chance of the effect. Mad Bomber Basic brings back the instant frag restoration effect when thrown 25% of the time, which isn't great, but when aced it will turn your frags into cluster grenades dealing 30% total damage, like the overskill for the Mamba offers, with each also giving a separate 10% chance to regen the thrown grenade, a 45% chance when all totaled up. I think frags sound like a fun playstyle, and Scavenger will undoubtedly be a staple skill once more, but I will say other throwables I'll get onto shortly receive just as much, if not more love. Also, without Blast Shield to prevent self-damage, I worry this could end up turning into a kamikaze playstyle. The ninja trees are up next, starting with Ghost and the return of the dodge mechanic in full. Dodge This is the starting skill, granting you a flat 2.5% chance to dodge up to 30% with a fully aced out tree. Here it's also stated that max dodge chance falls by 20% for each plate you have active, meaning 80% is the cap on one plate builds. I assume we can't just circumvent this, and it's just built into dodge as a mechanic, as opposed to being tied to the skill. Anyway, the Ace version gives you another potential 30% dodge chance after standing still for 2 seconds. To be honest, I've always raged against skills requiring you to stand still, as with the original version of Sharpshooter, but I suppose I'd have to know just for how long this increased dodge chance lasts before coming up with a clear judgment on whether it would be worth running. Flow State is another dodge augmenter, giving you up to 7.5% more dodge for every instance of cop damage you sustain until you actually successfully dodge a shot, at which point it resets. I can see this being decent for builds that aren't all in on dodge, but do want that capacity from time to time. Judo Chop is our first stealth-specific skill, allowing you to instantly drop unalerted guards with quick melee, with its Ace version taking on the properties of pressure points, meaning a guard taken out by this method will take much longer to alert other guards and civs when the body's spotted. This feels like it will be a bit of a stealth staple, if just because the effect is likely to look hilarious to anyone in the lobby. Under Pressure is another skill I'm having a tough time evaluating. Every time you dodge, you heal for 2 points, which can also give Adrenaline Overheal when aced out. 2 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you're at roughly 50% dodge, which doesn't seem that difficult to achieve, healing from 1 in every 2 shots is actually kinda crazy. Locksmith Basic is the return of Quick Fingers, a skill that speeds up lockpicking, whilst its Ace version gives you the ability to skip lockpicking altogether and instead melee doors open silently. A bit gimmicky, but I'll be saying the opposite if they give us the ability to melee open safe deposits. On the Run takes inspiration from Payday 2, giving you 15% dodge chance when sprinting or sliding, and for 2 seconds afterwards, meaning maintaining close to 100% uptime on this effect will be fairly easy for most aggressive players. The Ace version gives you the ability to shoot and reload SMGs while sprinting and sliding, which sounds fine, but is unlikely to be worth the point investment, in my opinion. With just this tree used properly, I expect to be hovering in that 75 to 80% dodge range, more than what even peak Rogue offered in Payday 2. Paired with impact armor, we could finally see that playstyle completely revived, for better or for worse. Speaking of SMGs though, Special Ops is built entirely around that weapon type, with SMG Adept giving you up to 30% more damage against enemy armor and 30% less recoil when aced. The recoil effect sounds like it could be genuinely impactful, unlike some of the more accuracy-focused skills I've talked about. Stockpile is a repeat skill for SMGs, whilst Multitasker is one of the most fun and engaging sounding skills I've discussed so far. At base, it will give you a stagger effect upon breaking an enemy's armor layer, building on this idea that SMGs are great at stripping armor, and then, when aced, it will give you the ability to quick melee a SWAT with an SMG to instantly reload its mag once every 10 seconds. Weaving melee into SMG gameplay fairly seamlessly. Steady Hands is another simple accuracy buff, giving you 35% increased accuracy in hipfire, or ADS, when you pick up a kill within 6 meters or further than that. When aced out, the buff will be to both accuracy stats, regardless of kill range. As we no longer have the spread shrinking skills of Gunslinger, this might be quite necessary for hipfire SMG setups. Cracked is again armor related, giving you and your team up to 30% more damage against any cop who's had an armor layer broken by your SMG. Another cooperative mark for death style effect, which I quite like. SM Genius, alongside being one of the best named skills, gives you a fairly complicated SMG buff to stack. Now, whenever you reload an empty mag, either manually or using Multitasker, you'll gain a 5% damage buff for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. You can refresh this by emptying another mag and reloading, suggesting it really encourages spray and pray playstyles. When aced, this buff stacks up to 20 times, giving you a potential double damage buff, and it'll also refresh when you break an enemy's armor layer. This skill is incredibly interesting, although I don't think it'll see a lot of play. That's because after reaching max stacks, it'll refresh for some reason, as if it wasn't hard enough already to maintain uptime on it. And it's gonna bring back that micromanagey gameplay we associated with the old Edge, Grit and Rush system. Moving on to Fog Machine, the most amusingly titled subtree in my opinion, this one is built around the smoke grenade throwable and seems quietly very powerful. Heavy Smoker increases the range of smoke by up to 60% depending on your skill investment, whilst acing it out extends its duration by up to 90%, which will synergize with most skills in the tree. Once more, we have Stockpile for smokes. I do understand why they've split these out amongst trees, but it's always a little disappointing whenever I spot them. Anyway, Brain Fog is an evolution of the Discombobulate skill, reducing the damage dealt by cops when inside your smoke and for 5 seconds after by up to 60% when aced out. This is a cop damage penalty, meaning it should stack separately to damage resistance, so you don't have to worry about hitting that cap. Smokescreen is Sicario inspired, turning a smoke grenade into a dodge generator, doubling your dodge when inside smoke on top of its passive cop accuracy impact, granting you a minimum of 25% dodge if you don't have any already in your build. When aced, it offers the same effect to all crew members, meaning objective forcing under the cover of smoke is absolutely back. In truth, dodge and smoke sounds pretty damn overpowered on paper. That's without even getting into the next tier 3 skill, Poisonous Gas, dealing up to 25 points of direct health damage per second to cops within the smoke radius when aced. Although we don't know exactly how much health cops will have after this update, and assumedly it'll be more than in the current version of the game given all the damage boosts we're getting, the fact that this skill circumvents armor makes me think it might just be top tier, seeing as that seems to be the primary route to tank up our foes. Also, don't ask why it doesn't hurt the heisters, Wolf's probably been microdosing. Escape Artist at the top of this subtree might be the most insane skill we've touched on so far. With this equipped, instead of going down, so long as you have a smoke grenade in your inventory, you'll automatically drop it, gaining a 100% dodge chance for 6 seconds. This costs the down, and specials will be able to drop you a second time I assume, but this is still insane. It has a 2-minute cooldown, but with medic bags likely to be as if not more abundant, why wouldn't you run this skill? It seems way too good for forcing objectives as we once did with Swansong. Not to mention, that's just the basic skill. Once aced, any headshot damage you deal whilst inside the smoke grenade will be increased by 4,444%. In other words, you'll receive infinite headshot damage for 6 seconds, allowing you to instantly deal with whatever took you down in the first place. By the way, 4,444% is not a typo, it's related to the Japanese number 4 shi, which is perceived as unlucky due to its connection to the word for death. You can actually see a mass pattern referencing this all the way back in Payday 2. Anyway, this sounds overtuned, and the only reason I won't be running smokes is because the other throwables received a fair bit of love as well. Moving on to Engineer though, a sentry focus line in the mechanic skill tree, they've gone full TF2 Engie on this one. The base skill, Sentry Operator, unlocks the Sentry deployable and increases its heat limit by up to 120% with 12 skill points in the tree. When aced, it raises their penetration by up to a mighty 1.2 points. This is as good as ARs, so if pen becomes meta, Sentries will be right up there as contenders. Repair Job is one of my favourite skills in the line, giving you the ability to quick melee your sentries and reduce their heat buildup by up to 25% when aced. Proper Engineer gaming, we just need a wrench. It also allows you to instantly cool them with a single shot grenade, building into that synergy and encouraging you to build out sentry nests. Artificial Ally is a slightly situational skill, with its base version granting teammates 10% more ammo from pickups when within 2 meters of a turret. This is going to be really clunky to make use of, and to be honest, I'm not sure 10% is going to make a tangible difference. However, once you ace it out, you'll unlock 360-degree rotations for those turrets, so it might be a dump stat regardless for sentry focused builds. Sentry Squad unlocks the second sentry when its base skill is unlocked, a no-brainer, although acing it out turns that into an army of 4 sentries, albeit they will build up heat 100% faster, meaning not every build will want to run this. Access to 4 sentries is a massive improvement for the playstyle though. Shields Up will help make the 4 sentry setup more viable as it reduces heat buildup from both shooting and receiving damage by 50%, probably a must build skill. Finally, War Machine might just be the most busted skill in the entire game once this update goes live. For each sentry kill, it will ramp up its damage by 3% at base, scaling indefinitely until you pick it up. However, when aced out, things get way crazier. Now, kills grant a 5% damage bonus, and it applies across all the turrets you have out. Even better, picking them up only reduces this bonus by 20%, not to 0, meaning so long as a turret gets 4 kills, it's going to be at least net neutral to your network's damage. The fact this has infinite scaling blows my mind, as this sounds like a serious boulder down a hill situation. Once your sentries have picked up about 20 kills, they'll be dealing double damage, at which point it'll be child's play for them to keep scaling. Not to mention, you can now avoid them ever overheating so long as you keep meleeing them with Repair Job. I can see myself building up an army of 300% damage sentries and totally taking over the entire heist effortlessly. Honestly, the only thing that might make this less overpowered is the fact that no one seems to enjoy babysitting sentry guns. As ever, my problem with sentries is the fact that they feel like all or nothing commitments. Either I ace the entire tree or ignore them completely. That's still the case here, although I'm far more tempted to ace this version of the tree out, because this sounds outright overpowered. Shotgunner is next, and you'll never guess which weapon class this one impacts. Calling shotgun will reduce your damage fall off by up to 30%, increasing the weapon's effective range, and when aced will tighten the pellet spread by up to 30% when ADS'd, just like how the TAS-12 used to function on launch, again making them more deadly over range. Stockpile is back for shotguns, whilst point blank will grant you up to 60% more damage at close range when aced out, specifically within 3 meters, which is actually the standard combat range for most shotguns anyway. A massive buff with a tiny prerequisite. Annihilation plays into this further by increasing the damage a shot does based directly on the number of pellets that land. This is obviously in addition to each pellet doing its own individual instance of damage. When aced, this scales to 10% per pellet. As I understand, after the first World Bank update, shotguns were standardized to all fire 10 pellets, meaning you'll deal up to 100% more damage with accurately placed meat shots. I actually wonder if this is going to make aiming for the center of mass, as opposed to heads with shotguns, a legitimate strategy. Regardless, when you trim the fat of this description, it's pretty much just a damage boosting skill. Speed loader is tied specifically to shotgun reload speed, a necessity now they've completely lost access to ammo funnel. Again, for each pellet you land, you'll gain up to a 2.5% speed increase on your next reload when aced. This caps at 70%, which should be very achievable with most mag-fed shotguns, although I don't see it working brilliantly on the pump actions, which also lose combat reload, hurting their potential viability in my opinion. Finally, Berserker might just be those single loaded options saving grace, giving you 50% damage reduction from all enemies within 5 meters during and for 1 second after a reload. The tank Rheinfeld build is already forming in my head, where I just go around shooting and reloading for the sake of insane resistances. Acing this out gives you the reload and fire skill while sprinting, which I again don't value that highly, certainly not this far up the tree. Taking a step back on Shotgunner, I get the idea. It's going to make using something like the Moscone a lot less punishing, especially without ammo funnel doing its thing. I also need to point out to you that whilst all shotguns will be rebalanced, and the FSA will surely lose its obviously overpowered crown, I am inclined to say that semi-auto options such as it and the M7 Pursuivant seem to benefit the most from this new skill design philosophy, so it will be interesting to see how this is all balanced out eventually. Finally, for this overarching tree, we have Electrician, the shock grenade subtree to synergize with your sentry guns. I already rate shocks very highly, if just because they delete the ever-annoying shield units, but shock factor makes them even more potent, increasing their blast radius by up to 72%, whilst the ace variant allows it to bounce up to 12 additional times. Stockpile increases your loadout capacity for shots, and stunned increases their stun duration by a further 75% when aced out. Renewable energy grants shocks 2 additional pulses, effectively extending its stun duration and increasing its likely reach on cops that move into the radius. Acing it out will enable you to replenish your reserves by granting you 1 back for every Zapper battery pack or shock mine destroyed, a situational but fairly common occurrence across most heists. Electric Tenderizer increases the damage stun cops will take from all sources based on the number of pulses they've been subjected to. When aced out, with 3 pulses as standard and 2 more coming from renewable energy, you can make stunned enemies take up to 125% more damage permanently. If this works on dozers too, even if they can't be directly stunned, this might end up being the best mark for death effect in the game. Highly Conductive is the tier 4 skill for shock grenades, stripping a layer of armor for each pulse they take. However, unlike Electric Tenderizer, this effect is temporary, limited to whilst the stun is active. This could be amazing, depending on just how tanky armor layers make the cops, but this is definitely a wait and see skill for me. Acing it out though, things get a little crazy, as cops hit by the shock grenade will emit their own chain lightning, stunning any other allies in their vicinity and applying all the shock grenade debuffs I've just covered. This isn't an endlessly chaining effect, as only those stunned by the initial grenade emit the secondary pulse, but even so, it sounds like a sight to behold. Moving down to Hacker, this is a much more stealth-focused tree, although even the stealth trees have loud-centric skills mixed in that are accessible thanks to the cross-tree tier system. Security Expert is going to be a must-have for all stealth builds, giving you the base ability to hack and control cameras, as well as up to 5 additional runtimes, the resources you spend when using other skills from this tree. The aced effect is basically just Scrambler, but extended by a second, allowing you to temporarily shut down detection drones and control the techie's combat drones for 7 seconds. This does beg the question, what's going to happen to the specialist drones that hack your edge, grit and rush stacks? Maybe they can wipe all buffs from now on. It will be interesting to see if they forget about this mechanic when the update lands. Pump Up the Jam also revives old Scrambler skills, giving you the ability to mark all cams and specials for the duration of your ECM jammer timer, in addition to your starting loadout receiving an additional ECM from the get-go when aced. Playback is simply a combination of secure loop and rooted ping, giving the ability to spend runtimes to either disable a camera or use them to mark guards on the map. High Marks is a loud skill, surrounded entirely by stealth ones, although maybe we'll finally see playback marking get some usage now we can't simply mark with smoke grenades. It allows you and your crew, when aced, to take up to 40% less damage from each marked enemy within 10 meters of you, with the full bonus requiring 10 marked cops in the vicinity. I do think this sounds powerful, especially combined with other massive DR skills, but again, I'm also worried its placement in the Black Hat tree will slightly hold it back. Radio Star is glitch protocol from the old skill set with adjusted timers, but all the same mechanics. It lasts for 5 seconds at base, increasing to a massive 10-second guard disruption when aced out. However, its cooldown remains at a flat 60 seconds, which I'd personally prefer to reduce when acing this out if given the choice. Finally, Electrical Interference is another loud skill that's existed previously in the form of Kinetic Short Circuit. When your ECM is active, your bullets will stun all enemies, barring dozers, for 5 seconds. It's a fun skill, but often left me thinking why I didn't just shoot to kill previously. Although, with cops assumedly getting tankier, and this effect being granted to your entire crew, not just your weapons, this might actually see some serious play. When aced, you can regen your ECMs by destroying Zappa's battery packs, just as you could before. This is a fine tree with a lot of returning stealth staples that also increases your runtimes, helping you to seriously control the map in stealth. I think it'll be solid, and I'm not too surprised to see very few newly invented stealth kills, as that aspect of the game already played well. Moving on to Hitman, this is the handgun class tree, which we're assuming will impact the majority of secondaries, barring potentially the Judge, which is for all intents and purposes a shotgun. Its base skill, Pistolier, will increase handgun damage by up to 30% as standard, or 120% to mark targets, as this tree holds a lot of the assassin marking skills we once had. When aced, it also grants handguns a potential 60% accuracy bonus. Stockpile is, once again, boring, coming alongside Quick Draw, another tier 2 skill with obvious Payday 2 roots. This increases handgun swap and ADS speed by up to 70%. All I'm left thinking now is if they ever add primary akimbo handguns at some point, this skill tree is going to be completely busted. Cheap Trick is next, the only human shield skill remaining since the old CQC line got canned, allowing you to take 40% less damage when holding a human shield and brandishing a handgun. This seems a little counterintuitive, bearing in mind the entire point of taking shields is the avoidance of damage altogether, so I'd much rather this be a damage or reload bonus instead. However, the Ace version is well worth the investment, giving you double damage against stunned enemies. Assumedly, this includes both shocked and flashbang cops. This in mind, if a cop is stunned and marked whilst having all skills in the line active, you'll be dealing over 4 times the base pistol damage. Spatial Awareness is another combination skill, bringing back Killer Kinesthetics and Assassin's Metal from Payday 3's original skill lines, and instead attaching them to pistols specifically. Now, killing a marked enemy with any handgun, silenced or not, you'll mark another within 10 meters automatically. When aced, you'll also heal and overheal for every kill you pick up on a marked target with a handgun, but only when running a single active armor plate. Immediately, I'm seeing this sort of handgun, dodge, one-plate impact armor synergy forming that could easily form the bedrock of a meta-defining build. Finally, in Bounty Hunter, we have another one of those totally out of left field tier 4 skills. Now, whenever you kill a special unit with a handgun, you'll be rewarded with one of 5 unit-specific resources. For Zappers, it's a tool, for Naders, a throwable, Cloakers, it's a 20% heal, Techies restore a broken armor plate, whilst Dozers restore a down. All of these bonuses are doubled if that special was marked once you ace the skill. This sounds totally insane. Imagine getting back 2 trip lasers every time you kill a Zapper. Within a few minutes, you'll have every cop on the map permanently marked. The synergies with this sound incredible, more than enough reason to specialise in handguns, or at least pack this skill for its obvious benefits. On paper, this is monstrous. In practice, we'll need to see just how relevant tools, healing and throwables end up being to work out if being able to resupply them at the drop of a hat will be overpowered. My gut feeling is that it will be. Flashpoint is next, a flashbang focused tree with Shine On increasing their stun duration by up to 120% and their range by up to 90% when aced. Stockpile is again not worth over-explaining, although Flash Mob might need some context. Now flashbangs are silent, meaning you can use them to control civs in stealth without alerting anyone on the map. Additionally, when aced, civs will remain in place for 2 minutes every time they get flashed, aiding in control and totally preventing the hostage rescue team from doing their job, synergizing passively with hostage-focused builds. Hypersensitive allows flashbangs to detonate on impact instead of on a timer, but only when they hit an enemy directly, like Overcooked with a skill flaw. When aced, this type of direct impact detonation will cause its stun effect to double in duration, stacking with any other skill extending that duration already. Spotlight allows flashbangs to mark cops, hence its placement within the same overarching tree as the pistol skills, although we don't see a specified duration for the marking effect. When aced, any marked cop taken out while stunned will drop 2 ammo boxes, something with massive synergy potential, although its power level will be highly dependent on how they balance the ammo economy. Sunburn grants your flashbangs a similar mark for death effect, offering 15% increased damage, scaling to a potential 180% with a fully aced out skill tree, whilst its aced effect allows you to strip half a cop's armor layers instantly. This seems to synergize with direct damage playstyle of SMGs, shotguns and DMRs, but has a counter synergy with ARs and LMGs, so keep that in mind. Moving on to the Conman line, we get more stealth skills here, with Imposter taking a lot of cues from Grifter and its social stealth playstyle. Sadly, I think this is the tree that's having the most significant identity crisis between loud and stealth, but more on that shortly. Its starting skill, Adrenaline Junkie, gives you additional adrenaline gain from all sources by up to 60%, that includes pistol and dodge healing. Its ace effect on the other hand is totally stealth based, as now when you have no adrenaline and walk unmasked within 1 meter of a civ, you'll automatically gain 10. Why? Seeing as adrenaline is a loud resource, well that's because it now replaces rush to activate these grifter style skills when unmasked. Plain Sight and its ace variant makes it so cams and employees detect you at a slower rate in private and secure areas respectively when unmasked, and Thrill Seeker prevents adrenaline from decaying when in that state, whilst acing it will increase your movement speed with adrenaline, again acting as a rush surrogate. Hall Pass, when aced, makes it so your illegal actions are undetectable by cams and employees when unmasked, which is kind of hilarious as we don't even need rush anymore to totally clean out dirty ice in plain sight. Strong Armed is another of those surprising skills though, totally unlike anything we had in the base game. It allows you to use throwables whilst unmasked. This will obviously have synergy with flashbangs, as discussed just previously, but also opens up unmasked knife distractions, which I can see breaking stealth at times. Another wait and see skill node for me though. Finally, Seeing Red is one of the more clunky skill implementations in the game in my opinion. It's a tier 4 skill that when aced out will provide you with a 5% damage bonus when you have adrenaline, scaling for each skill owned in the tree to a max of 60%. Now, free damage is always nice, I don't think it'll be too hard to maintain a little bit of adrenaline at all times, especially with a dodge build. My problem is, this is a loud only skill that scales with total skill investment, which is an issue when a good 50% of the skills in the tree are stealth focused. It means if you want to get the most out of loud adrenaline setups, you'll need to point dump into useless skills for your build, a little bit like having to grab loads of irrelevant skills before Graze on a Payday 2 sniper build. I don't have a problem with the tier 4 skill scaling with point investment, so long as those points feel well utilised for the playstyle. Here, they are not, so I'd suggest changing this tree's design up entirely. Pill Pusher next, the Dallas Medic Bag tree, which also has a lot of those old revival skills from the original medic skill line. Doctor's Orders increases your revive speed by up to 60%, and when aced, will give you and any crewmate you revive damage immunity for up to 4.8 seconds, almost as long as it used to be for running Combat Medic, but requiring far greater skill commitment for what is a rather overpowered effect. This is the Skills 2.0 design philosophy working exactly as intended from my perspective. Field Medic 1 and 2 simply buff your medic bags by adding more charges and a second copy of the deployable to your inventory, important but not all that exciting. Scar Tissue and Pain Tolerance are two skills that both seem busted and ridiculously designed, until you realise this is just the result of a misunderstanding and is not the intended game design. As read in the blog post, it sounds like you'll be gaining additional health and adrenaline bar resistance for every time you've been downed, with no mention of a scaling cap. In theory, you could farm downs for infinite health and damage resistance, which would obviously be broken and not particularly fun. Fortunately, that was just a misunderstanding. Instead, it should be read for each down you have. that being the resource you see next to your health bar, you gain 30 max health. So with 4 downs max, it's basically just a 120 hit point boost. As for pain tolerance, the same is true, except this also has some interesting bonus effects, such as giving you adrenaline for takedowns, kills with throwing knives, revives, and shared medic bag usages, in addition to picking up loose cash, which is going to go crazy on heists like First World Bank. Also, when aced out, it will count half the points in the tree towards its adrenaline boosting effect, meaning at most you can have 10 downs worth of boosts. In other words, your adrenaline bar will take half the damage it normally would. Don't misunderstand, it shouldn't be giving you 6 extra downs in a heist. That said, taking a step back, I actually don't think these skills are very good, and I suspect adrenaline won't be a particularly popular playstyle at launch. Health Guru, the tier 4 medic bag skill, is fortunately a hell of a lot easier to pass. At base, it will make it so your medic bags scale with an ally's total health pool, and when aced, it allows you to drop medic bags as an instant 5 meter radius heal and revive. This is a really cool skill implementation, a sort of balanced inspire that will feel incredibly clutch when it works out as intended. This feels like a tree I'll dip in and out of a lot more than others, with a few standouts that seem to be worth your time, whilst others might be worth skipping out on. Cutthroat, on the other hand, might just be my favourite sub-tree they're adding, at least in concept. This is a throwing knife tree done in the most bombastic way possible. Knife Expert will increase your base throwing knife capacity by up to 12, meaning a total of 14 with the 2 you normally have as standard. When aced, it will make the knives penetrate 1 additional target for each skill point you have equipped, which will all make a lot more sense in a second. Deep Wounds increases your throwing knife damage by up to 60% with no caveat, which again I think is a sign of just how much tankier we can expect cops to be soon. Laceration is very unique in that it'll give your knives a bleed effect which avoids armor and totals to 2 times the base knife damage across 8 seconds, 3 seconds when aced. I love bleed effects and I'm drawn in by any skill that deals direct health damage, as I suspect they'll be the best counters to this new layered armor system. Probably a must build if you're reliant on the throwing knife. Fan throw though is where things get really silly. When aced, you can toss 3 knives at once in a fanning arc, increasing the odds of landing your throw and potentially tripling their potential damage on single targets. Now you can see where the penetration effect might come into play with scattershot knives in our arsenal. This skill is supported by Prison Shiv, which allows you to create a new knife for every 3 ammo boxes you pick up, coming with the trade-off of no longer being able to resupply knives from ammo bags. I'll need to test it properly, but I'm not sure that drawback is all that necessary, as even with the ability to replenish your knives, I doubt they'll be self-sustaining. The tier 4 skill is Hidden Blade, giving you the ability to one-shot any target other than dozers by quick meleeing them at the cost of a knife from your inventory. When aced, you can do this with no throwing knives remaining, but only on a 30-second cooldown, so this isn't quite the melee build we've been requesting. My question is, why wouldn't you just throw your knife at melee range to avoid using it up? But this all depends on exactly how tanky they choose to make cops. If they're Payday the Heist style juggernauts, an instant kill effect might just end up being essential. I adore the creativity and in places the silliness of this line, and embodies those more creative skills and perk decks from Payday 2's heyday, but I do see a design flaw. There's no skill that enables the pickup of throwing knives any longer unless they hit a target. The problem is, with the ability to penetrate targets, the odds they'll go straight through the cop you're aiming at and break on the concrete behind them feel pretty high. This means I think sustaining a knife supply is going to be a bit of a nightmare, especially if you're using Knife Expert aced. The way they avoid that, in my opinion, is by preventing knives from breaking so long as they hit at least 1 target, but then you have the other problem of running around the map trying to spot a tiny white dot that could have bounced just about anywhere. I need to get my hands on this one to really know how it's going to play, but I do have a few initial worries. Moving on to the final overarching tree, the professional, Puppet Master is the manipulator hostage trade focused subtree. Its base skill Trade Broker is going to be pivotal, as for each hostage you trade, it'll count as 2, plus up to 5 more depending on your skill investment in the tree. Acing it will also allow you to tie and trade hostages up to 60% faster, which is close to the original Manipulator skill. Consumerism increases your trade consumable capacity by up to 4 when aced out, although without Clean Slate and with Adrenaline seemingly a little weaker, FAKs and ARKs might not be as core to the meta as they once were. Magnetic Charm gives you an extra hostage trade when they happen to be of the security, employee, or law enforcement tier, taking us up to a total of 8. whilst the aced version lets you command up to 5 hostages at once to follow you like baby ducklings, up from 3 in the old system. Scare Tactics gives you the ability to dominate non-special law enforcement, however we still don't have jokers. I just think they're such a balancing nightmare, I don't even know how they go about trying to fit them into Payday 3 right now. When aced, you can actually dominate up to 3 SWAT hostages though, which is a 3-fold increase from the old cap, really helping out on endurance heists such as Cook-Off or Party Powder. Human Resources, alongside being my favourite name for a skill, adds an additional copy of whatever your starting deployable was to your inventory, so long as it wasn't a sentry gun, for every 60 hostages traded, falling to 30 when aced out. That might sound like a lot on paper, but bearing in mind you'll be trading at a ratio of up to 8 to 1, for 30 that actually takes fewer than 4 individual trades in some instances. This means you can seriously stack up on healing or ammo throughout a heist, as resource scarcity seems to have been entirely obliterated. I think this skill is interesting, but likely to be a little overtuned, as it wasn't as if we were at a resource deficit going into this patch, and not all that engaging to use sadly. We'll see. Insurance Plan is of a similar ilk, although there's actually counter synergy with this entire tree, as it relies upon keeping hostages around rather than trading them. When aced out, this will give you and your team 5% damage reduction for each tied hostage within 15 meters of your position, up to a cap of 50% DR. That's insanely free on most heists in the game. The only thing balancing this skill is the fact I don't think players enjoy juggling hostages. There is a tendency I see online to trade them as soon as possible, despite the already obvious benefits they provide, and even with an evidently overpowered skill like this one, habits are fairly well ingrained. Insurance Plan seems ridiculous, especially on holdout style heists like Cook-Off, but we'll see if teams actually bother with the setup required. Longshot is focused on the only weapon class types I haven't mentioned, marksman rifles and snipers. Head games sounds absolutely ludicrous, tuning up your headshot multiplier by up to 12 times, surely resulting in one-shot headshots virtually across the entire weapon class. I don't know though, because again, we don't know how this is going to interact with armor or what base weapon headshot multipliers will soon look like. Its aced effect really doesn't impress me, as a 10% scaling boost for each headshot landed, reducing by 10% for each miss, sounds unlikely to make a tangible impact, especially on the faster firing marksman class. I can see a world where it makes snipers very powerful, but it's too gimmicky and aim dependent to really see much use. Skull Trauma is another small damage boost to both weapon types, giving them a flat 15% headshot damage increase, which might help certain guns hit key breakpoints, whilst the aced effect increases their reload speed by 20%. Stockpile is also here as ever. But we move on to Return Policy, a seeming devolution of the already dubious Headhunter skill. When aced, this refunds bullets that hit cops in the head on a strict 3-second cooldown, which is double the old skill's timer. Maybe snipers can benefit at a push, especially after losing ammo funnel, but I wouldn't bother with this on marksman rifles personally. Armor piercing, ironically, doesn't involve the armor penetration stat. Instead, it relates to stripping armor, which is actually what will happen every time you land an armor breaking headshot with these weapon classes. Instead of 1 layer, it'll break 2. Potentially, the mid to low damage marksman rifles will benefit massively from this, but I'd be expecting my Ranfeld to still one-shot kill most things, or there's no way in hell I'll be using it. The aced effect brings back the ability for your weapon to penetrate an extra target, which can be effective, especially on more corridor heavy heist, but isn't a must build. Ricochet is where it's at though. It's just greys with a slightly wider radius, probably to reflect Payday 3's less bunched up spawns. All headshots with rifles will deal 100% of their damage to enemies within 2 meters of the struck target, although note, it won't penetrate armor, so don't expect this to be a one-click delete button as it is in Payday 2. Still, getting this sort of effect on a fast-firing option like the FIC-22 really interests me. In all honesty, I have no idea where to place this tree in my mental tier list. I'm erring on the side of broken because of head games, but its lack of penetration does ring alarm bells, which can't be turned off until I see exactly how the new cop armor system works. Last but not least, well, kinda least actually, we have Ammo Specialist, the black sheep of the equipment skill trees. Munitions Expert makes uses of your placed ammo bag grant up to 60% more ammo, whilst the Ace version gives you up to 6 throwables per usage depending on commitment to the tree. Ammo Up 1 and 2 simply buff the ammo bag directly, whilst also adding another to your starting inventory, meaning we move on to Bullet Frenzy. This is pretty much high grain from the old system, a 20% universal damage bonus for 12 seconds when anyone uses your ammo bag, scaling up to 50% when aced. From what we've already read, you'll know 50% is about the minimum damage bonus you could hope for, so I'm not all that impressed. Yes, this will stack on top of other buffs, but a 12-second timer feels far too limiting and makes you want to use the bag when you don't necessarily need ammo from it. I think a toned-down version of Bulletstorm from Payday 2 would have fit this notch much better than another timer-focused skill. Utility Belt increases your throwable capacity by a further 5 when aced, which will stack with whatever version of stockpile you're running to really skyrocket your throwable reserves. Lastly, Premium Bag has an on-ammo bag drop effect, giving your teammates within 5 meters 2 throwables when you place it, which feels like a really poor imitation of the Medic Bag equivalent in my opinion. The aced effect is just Bullet Frenzy, except this time you're getting 0.8 Armor Pen for 12 seconds instead of direct damage when you grab ammo. Armor Pen could be like Gold Dust, especially on weapons that don't seem to have access to augmented pen skills, so this might be amazing, but I still hate things being on a timer. I'd much rather this gave you armor penetrating rounds, which you can fire at your leisure. As a result, I don't suspect I'll be going anywhere near the ammo tree unless it's purely to fuel my throwable rampage, as those skill trees interest me much more. And that's it for this Skills 2.0 overview. They really weren't messing around with this one, I've got to give it to them, this is a lot of skills to wrap our heads around. My takeaway is that the overarching system looks to have a hell of a lot of potential, and there are absolutely some 10 out of 10 skills and even trees. However, there's still undoubtedly room for improvement and refining of a number of particularly weak, imbalanced or illogical skills. I think the most appropriate approach would have been to hold a public test beta, but with how slow the pipeline has been over the past 2 years, I can see why they wouldn't want any more stoppages slowing them down. Payday 3 needs content more desperately than said content needs to be polished. Sadly, that's just where we're at. I do think there's significant room for improvement, especially in stealth, which didn't get the same love as loud, and I'm not positive the whole weapon class locking was necessary in all cases. It does simplify balance, and I don't hate it, but it might pigeonhole players a little more than intended. There's also a few lost skills such as cam distortion, open mic and drop cloth that haven't been replaced at all, which Starbreeze should look into for future updates. Regardless, let me know in the comments what you think of this system, any standout skills I failed to highlight or missing favourites that you'd like to see Starbreeze add in the future. As I discussed on stream yesterday, there's still a lot of room for skills related to utilities such as drills or C4, akimbo weapons and melee in the future, if those systems are being worked on as we hope they are. Thank you so much for watching. I almost can't believe we made it to Skills 2.0. I say that, but we don't know when the release date actually is, so here's hoping the world doesn't implode before then. Anyway, take care guys, I'll see you all in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.